During Erev Rosh Hashanah, we gathered and had a conversation, or it was more like a sermon on my behalf, about anti-Semitism, everybody's favorite or not favorite topic. Tonight I want to shift us from a conversation about how others perceive us to how we perceive ourselves. What is our internal narrative as American Jews? What was it before October 7th, and honestly, how was it altered since? And can we affect that narrative? For decades, I think many of us have lived in the golden age of American Judaism. We found acceptance, success, and security. The era was marked by increasing social inclusion, economic prosperity, and cultural influence. All you got to do is think of Seinfeld. Says it all right there. Jewish community centers flourished, the Anti-Defamation League grew in strength, and Jewish studies programs appeared in many universities across the nation. Holocaust museums and education initiatives ensured that what happened to us in our past would be remembered and enshrined. We had and experienced strong support for the state of Israel, especially after the Six-Day War, and enjoyed strong ties between America and Israel. And yet, of course, this golden age brought its own challenges. There were concerns about assimilation and loss of Jewish identity, debates of are you an American Jew or a Jewish American, and wide divides between the Orthodox and non-Orthodox communities. Recently, we have seen a shaken sense of security forcing us to confront new realities, which have, of course, challenged our Jewish identity and the strength of our community. And by the way, those trends were happening even before October 7th. Before then, we faced headlines like wanted, more rabbis. And non-Orthodox seminaries try to adapt to changing communal needs and shrinking enrollment. Doubts were beginning to grow about the sustainability of the alphabet soup of American Jewish institutions. There was, of course, increasing anti-Semitism. There were security concerns. But of course, when we look back at what major news trends were, there was a conversation on Jewish philanthropy and discussions of how Jewish institutions would cope with inflation. And then came October 7th. And the golden age of American Judaism seems to have ended in its own way. For me, though, the realization that we were in shifting ground began the summer before, the summer that the GDL visited our congregation. I began to really understand at that point that we were valued and welcome and cherished members of our society, but we were beginning to become targets once again. The era when Jews contributed in literature, in science, and mathematics, and religious thought, at that point, those celebrated moments were beginning to change. Jewish authors and academics were increasingly finding themselves separated from their professional homes. And so how do we talk about this? And how do we make sense of it all? Rabbi Benay Lapp, founder of Rosh Yeshiva Sfar, a yeshiva focusing on queer Talmudic studies, teaches that every cultural tradition and religion has a master story, and that answers life's fundamental questions. For Jews, our master story is the Torah. Rabbi Lapp asserts that every master story ultimately and inevitably crashes. And our story's answers are, all of a sudden, no longer workable. On October 7th, our Jewish story experienced a major crash. Aside from those of us who lived through the Holocaust, a crash like this has never occurred in our lifetimes. Rabbi Lepay teaches that there are, in fact, 3 possible responses to such a crash. Option 1. We deny the crash is even going on. We revert back to our old master narrative. We are hanging on for dear life, building walls up around that master story to make sure that nothing interferes or threatens it. Option 2, the master story has crashed completely. It is gone. It is rejected. It is wiped off the map and a new story needs to be put in place. In option 3, it still has crashed, but instead of abandoning the story, we retain parts of it, we reframe it, we reinterpret it, and through the lens of the crash, we build a new story from an amalgamation of the original and where we would like to go. We have reinterpreted. So tonight, I'll ask, what was the narrative of the Jewish community before the 7th? And how does it look through the lens of the crash? Option 1ers and option 2ers and option 3ers are all going to answer it a little differently. And by the way, I suspect there's option 1, 2, and 3 sitting in this very sanctuary, whether you're conscious or not conscious of being so. So the option 1ers, those who are denying that the crash even occurred, are holding tightly onto the original narrative. And before October 7th, you may hear them say things such as, our communities face significant challenges, declining religious engagement, especially among our youth, a fractured relationship with Israel, rising anti-Semitism, deep division along generational and political lines. That sounds like you're in good company. Now you may find yourself saying something like, October 7th was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. Israel has the right to defend itself by any means necessary. This response reinforces the original story. Option 2ers, those of you who have rejected that story altogether, are going to, of course, sound different. You may have said, peace is possible through dialogue and compromise. Our safety in the diaspora is secure. Now, since October 7th, you may find yourself saying, we've lost all hope, and you may even be wringing your hands. It feels too dangerous to express our Judaism in this climate. You may find yourself doing this. You have felt disillusioned. In option 2, you have felt fearful. Let's look at option 3. We've accepted the story. It's crashed. It's changed. Where we were and where we're headed is not where we thought we were going to be going. But let's stay in it. You're going to reinterpret it. It's going to be a wild ride. Before the crash of the story, you might have said, progress towards peace, a sense of security in the diaspora. Let's continue our interfaith dialogues and let's continue our cultural renaissance. Since the crash of that narrative, you may find yourself saying things like, peace is still possible, two-state solution, but it's so complicated. Vigilance, we have to be vigilant in the diaspora. Jewish life is diverse and it remains essential, but it's complicated. Israel faces security challenge. We have to adapt and preserve in the new complex arena that we are finding ourselves in. I think you may find yourself fitting into one of those places. And if not, maybe there's a third or fourth one that I'm unaware of. Please educate me after the fact. I believe that these outlooks, whether holding on to the past, rejecting the story entirely, or reinterpreting it, is a reflection of where many of us are today. In truth, we often choose not necessarily even where we want to be. It's just perhaps a gut instinct. Something is propelling us to go there. For some, remaining with an eye toward the past is the most comfortable thing we could do. And I want to reassure you that if you're in that spot, that's great. Because people like you preserved who we were for over 2,000 years. You developed a wonderful understanding of the value of Jewish history. And you've expressed it through theological concern, linking conditions of exile, homelessness, and political powerlessness with sin, and having amazing liturgical developments, including the prayer that many of us say in the mornings. Because of our sins, we were exiled from our country, banished far from our land. Our Father, our King, speedily revealed thy glorious majesty to us, shine forth and be exalted over us in the sight of all living. Our prophets even go on to charge us to engage in spiritual transformation and repentance. We are entrenched and loving it. We are wrestling in it. And yet that narrative was challenged and changed in the late 1800s with the advent of secular Zionism. The gift that Zionists came was they looked at that narrative and said, it doesn't fit us anymore. If we want to state, if we want to change our exilic conditions, we must learn how nations emerge and survive. If we want to return to the land, don't wait for a miracle or a prophet to arise. Build agricultural skills, improve your economic base and your knowledge of banking and finance, develop the art of self-defense, become a scholar of modern warfare, be experts in matters of statesmanship. And after the establishment of the state of Israel, many viewed what had happened from a theological lens as a gift. But as I wake up from the narrative, from the crash, the realization that perhaps the 70 years of the golden age of American Judaism was simply a reprieve from the continuous suffering that has beleaguered our people. It is that very dissonance which forces me to challenge us to rewrite our narrative. As any narrative therapist will tell you, rewriting our narrative can be challenging, but it's worth it. And I'll give you some inspiring examples just to push us a little bit along the way. I want us to remember of a rabbi named Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He didn't foresee the development of rabbinic Judaism. He just knew that there was an absence of a physical locus, the temple in Jerusalem, and he needed a new locus. He and a small group of committed rabbis formed a religious center in Yavne, re-establishing the Sanhedrin court, and the seeds were planted for the rabbinic Judaism that has thrived all the years since. The Talmud became the focal point of argumentation, debate, and even enhancement of our faith. Yochanan took option 3. I want to explore another option. Emanuel Ringelbaum. He was a Jewish historian in Warsaw during World War II who created Oneg Shabbat Archive to document the life in the Warsaw Ghetto. This archive was a collection of wide range of materials from diaries to official reports to everyday items which were stored in milk churns and boxes buried in the ghetto. Though Ringbaum and most of the contributors perished, 2 of the 3 hidden caches were recovered after the war. The UNESCO now recognizes those archives as containing a significant historical value. Emmanuel chose option 1. He wanted to maintain who he was, keep his roots, and use his faith to inspire him in the face of a crushed world. We need those to maintain our links. Of option 2, we may say of this group that they're engaged of a different level of assimilation for reasons which, in fact, make sense for many of us. And I'll remind you that it's not like it's a new thing, the struggle of assimilation, the struggle of are you in or are you out, or what does that even look like? Jews under Roman rule had various levels of positions, not just in Judea, but all over Roman-controlled Europe and North Africa, where they lived in urban centers and had positions in various levels of civic government and business ownership. Because of them, they were the economic backbone of our society. But this evening, or I should say last week, more specifically, we read the Unetane Tokef prayer. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Today, I invite you to help write and seal a new chapter of our people's story. A chapter of resilience, of unity, of ethical action, of deepening faith. October 7th caused an urgency, an alarm bell ringing. and it's been ringing for a year. It asks us, I believe, to construct a narrative so that our core values remain intact. The value of tikkun olam, of repairing the world, the value of tzedakah, charity and justice, the value of Ahavat Yisrael, the love and support of fellow Jews, the value of B'Tselem Elohim, that we are all created in the image of God, and value our inclusiveness. We must demand from ourselves in the new narrative that we need to construct together a unity without uniformity, where we can accept disagreements and differences in a wide range of beliefs, practices, and political views. We must invest in education of our children and adults alike. We can achieve this by finding innovative ways to make Jewish learning accessible in the digital age. I'm having fun with AI. I don't know about you, but it's made my life so much easier. We must begin asking deep theological questions, like where will God be in our narrative? What will our relationship with God look like and feel like? For some, God has been a source of comfort in troubled times. For others, God is that challenger calling us to action. For many, God is a mystery we continue to grapple with. And our tradition teaches us that wrestling with these questions is itself a form of devotion. As the psalmist wrote, God is our refuge and our strength, our very presence, our help in trouble. These questions, of course, are not new to Judaism. Our tradition has long grappled with them. Perhaps now more than ever, though, we can embrace the complexity. We can view God not just as a comforter, but as a challenger, calling us to act and calling us to growth. As the Kotzer Rabbi famously said, where is God? God is where you let God in. When Moses left Egypt, the Israelites carried all of their history and all of the pain that they had experienced. And they ran to Mount Sinai and they found God there. When the temple was destroyed, the Jews living in Babylonia listened to visions of communal resurrection, the one with the dancing bones with Ezekiel. It reassured them that God was there, and then when just one generation later they found themselves back rebuilding the land of Judea, they knew God never left them. Now when we feel alone, when we feel isolated and scared, now more than ever, we must reach out to one another and form new, deeper relationships. As we stand here on Yom Kippur, poised between reflection in our past and hope toward our future, we have an opportunity and indeed a responsibility to begin writing a new chapter of our people's story. A narrative isn't a rejection of who we were or where we've been, but a reaffirmation of our core values in light of our current reality. We must remain committed to tikkun olam, the repair of our broken world. Of course, of incorporating the grappling challenges of climate change, political polarization, and the aftermaths of a global pandemic. We must reaffirm our commitment to tzedakah, to charity, not just as a pursuit of justice, but also in the face of rising anti-Semitism and hatred. We must renew our dedication toward Ahavat Yisrael, our love for our fellow Jews, even when we find our community divided along political, cultural, or even religious lines. We can recommit ourselves to seeing the divine image, B'Tselem Elohim, in every human being. The principle calls us to build bridges beyond our community, engage in meaningful interfaith dialogue and cooperation. Our new narrative is going to be one of resilience. We have faced adversity before, and each time we have emerged stronger. We will adapt our practices as needed, and we will not waver in our core identity and values. Our narrative will be one complete with ethical leadership. In a world hungry for moral guidance, we have an opportunity to lead by example. I invite you in this congregation to commit yourselves to Jewish learning. If you haven't checked out Kiddush Club, give it a shot. We have fun. Volunteer in the congregation. I can promise you there's always something to do. Reach out beyond your comfort zone and build a relationship with others in front of you. As we read in Pirkei Avot, it is not your duty to complete the work, but neither are you free from desist from it. We may not complete this narrative today, we may not complete it tomorrow, but we can begin it on this Yom Kippur. Together we have the strength to face our challenges. Together, the wisdom to chart our course. And together we will build a Jewish future that honors our past while embracing our promise for tomorrow. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed in the book of life, and may we all be inscribed in the new, hopeful chapter that we begin writing today.